The studio lights blaze white-hot, cutting through the hum of live television. A ripple of gasps rolls through the audience, sharp, unfiltered, electric. Cameras pivot, zooming tight on Jasmine's face. She isn't shouting. She isn't even smiling. Just steady eyes, calm voice, truth hanging in the air like a spark looking for oxygen. Across from her, Ivanka freezes. For the briefest second, the mask cracks. That trademark serenity, the gentle nods, the diplomatic poise, falters. Her lips press together. Her eyes flick toward the control booth, searching for help that isn't coming. The smile reappears, practiced and porcelain, but the air has changed. The anchor stumbles over their words. We'll come back to that. A nervous laugh follows, swallowed quickly by silence. The audience doesn't know whether to clap or hold its breath. On millions of screens, America watches Ivanka Trump, unflappable for years, suddenly without a script. Jasmine leans back in her chair, unhurried. The power isn't in what she said. It's in what she didn't need to say. Her presence alone feels like an indictment, her silence a mirror held up to privilege. The camera lingers on her for a beat too long, producers whispering frantically through headsets. The screen flickers, a jump cut, static flash, rewind effect. But what just happened on live TV didn't start here. Before the headlines, before the hashtags, before the moment the world stopped pretending not to see, there was a story, a life. A truth waiting for the right moment, the right voice, the right camera angle. The lights dim, the sound fades, and we drift backward in time. The applause that night wasn't for performance. It was for courage. And courage rarely begins under studio lights. It begins in silence, in struggle, in someone deciding they've been quiet long enough. The camera slows on Ivanka's uneasy smile, the one the internet will replay 1,000 times in slow motion. Her eyes say it all, confusion, disbelief, a flicker of fear. Because once you know Jasmine's story, you'll never see that smile on Ivanka's face the same way again. Before the chaos, before the headlines screamed, "Live TV erupts," it was supposed to be just another night of polite television. The set gleamed under soft gold lights, a cathedral for charm and civility. The network's flagship show, famous for its glossy interviews and sugar-coated diplomacy, promised an inspiring women's special. Smiles, anecdotes, photo-ready laughter. Nothing risky, nothing real. Ivanka was the centerpiece. The perfect brand, polished, graceful, calibrated. Her team had crafted the segment down to the last camera angle. Success story, empowerment, elegance without friction. The world would see her as untouchable again, the flawless daughter of privilege turned symbol of modern femininity. And then there was Jasmine. No designer wardrobe, no entourage. Just a woman with a calm presence and a truth heavy enough to make empires tremble. She wasn't booked for confrontation. She was invited as a community voice, a token of balance to complement the show's elite guest. But Jasmine didn't come for balance. She came for honesty. The producers thought they were safe. They thought they knew their script. What they didn't know was that Jasmine had spent years watching people like her erased, stories like hers sanitized. And tonight, under those perfect lights, she decided to stop watching. Social media buzzed in the hours leading up to the taping. Teasers filled the timeline. Ivanka Trump joins our exclusive panel. A night of inspiration you don't want to miss. Comment sections glowed with anticipation. Fans typed heart emojis and praise. Skeptics rolled their eyes. And somewhere between those reactions, curiosity grew, because sitting beside Ivanka would be someone unfamiliar, someone the public hadn't yet Googled. As the clock ticked toward airtime, the control room hummed with confidence. No one knew that within minutes, that confidence would collapse into disbelief. The countdown reached 0. Red light flashed. We're live. For a while, it went smoothly. Rehearsed questions, predictable smiles. But under the table, Jasmine's hands weren't trembling. They were steady. Her silence wasn't fear. It was focus. No one in that room, not Ivanka, not the host, not the millions watching, knew that. Jasmine carried a truth sharp enough to pierce the illusion. But the real explosion wasn't just on TV. It was what Jasmine knew that would rewrite Ivanka's image forever. For nearly a decade, Ivanka Trump perfected the art of being untouchable. Every appearance, every photo op, every word on camera was another tile in her marble monument to composure. She was the image of quiet power, luxury softened by diplomacy, ambition wrapped in silk. When she spoke, it was with the calm precision of someone who had never been interrupted, never been questioned. America didn't see a politician's daughter. They saw a brand. Behind the scenes, entire teams labored to protect that image. Lighting crews learned which angles flattered her best. Publicists massaged every headline into a hymn of elegance. Interviews were screened, topics negotiated, edges softened. Even her pauses seemed rehearsed, silence weaponized into charm. But beneath the sheen, critics whispered. They called it performative empathy, compassion rehearsed for the camera, not born from consequence. They pointed to the workers in her overseas factories, to policies she endorsed, to the glittering hypocrisy between her words and her world. Each time she smiled. Each time, the moment passed. In one infamous interview, a journalist had dared to ask about those very contradictions. Wealth built on labor, feminism framed through privilege. Ivanka didn't flinch. She offered a smooth deflection, a gentle laugh, a vague affirmation about empowerment. The segment ended. The audience applauded. The fortress stood tall. That was her genius. The ability to make discomfort look like grace, to turn scrutiny into a branding opportunity. She didn't debate. She disarmed. Every camera became a mirror, reflecting back the version of herself she wanted the world to believe in. But on this night, under the same lights, facing Jasmine across that polished table, something different was coming. Jasmine wasn't another interviewer trying to be polite. She wasn't starstruck or intimidated by pedigree. She had lived in the spaces Ivanka only talked about, and when she spoke, her words would slice through every script Ivanka had ever memorized. For years, Ivanka built a fortress of perfection, a palace of light, mirrors, and PR armor. And on this night, Jasmine would find the first crack. Because the secret Jasmine carried didn't just challenge Ivanka's politics, it challenged her persona. Long before the cameras, before the headlines turned her name into a hashtag, Jasmine was just a woman trying to be heard in a world that preferred her silent. She came from the kind of neighborhood television rarely visits, small apartments stacked with stories, not status. Her mother worked double shifts at a clinic. Her father fixed things that no one else could afford to replace. There were no brand deals, no PR teams, no curated perfection, just work, honesty, and a belief that truth was worth the bruises it brought. Jasmine grew up learning that silence had a cost. She saw neighbors lose jobs while the rich called it market adjustment. She saw women dismissed as too emotional for daring to speak about injustice. And somewhere between the noise of survival and the quiet of her own thoughts, she decided she wouldn't play along. She became a writer, a speaker, an activist, not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted accountability. She never had a brand manager, just a voice. That line became her signature on every stage, every interview that didn't air. Her words weren't polished. They were raw, shaped by life, not strategy. Every time someone told her to tone it down, she sharpened her truth instead. Every rejection became rehearsal. Every silence became fuel. Her early battles were small, exposing local officials who misused funds meant for families, defending immigrants mistreated at their jobs, confronting boardrooms where decisions were made by people who had never set foot in the communities they controlled. Each fight made her tougher, not colder, but one story cut deeper than the rest. A friend, a factory worker overseas, once sent her a message describing brutal hours, unpaid wages, and fear of speaking out. The brand that profited from that silence, one of Ivanka's, that message stayed in Jasmine's inbox for years, unread by the world but unforgettable to her. It wasn't just injustice, it was personal. So when she sat across from Ivanka that night under the same lights that had protected privilege for decades, Jasmine didn't see a celebrity. She saw the face of a system that silences truth, and she wasn't nervous. She was ready. The lights are bright again. The show is live. On screen, everything looks composed, but beneath the gloss, the tension hums like a wire ready to snap. The conversation starts politely enough. The host smiles too widely, reading from cue cards. Ivanka answers with that signature grace, every phrase dipped in honey. "We're so proud of the initiatives we've built," she says, her voice calm, her eyes confident. The audience nods. It's familiar, predictable, exactly as the producers planned, but Jasmine isn't here to nod. Her first response lands softly, almost too softly, measured, thoughtful, impossible to dismiss. "Those initiatives sound promising," she begins, "but for many of us on the ground, those promises never reach the people who need them." The tone isn't confrontational. It's grounded, factual. Still, the room shifts. The host clears his throat. Ivanka blinks once, surprise disguised as patience. They move on, question by question, but Jasmine's words start drawing sharper edges. She speaks about workers without benefits, mothers who can't afford the very products Ivanka's brand sells. Each sentence cuts closer to the bone, hinting at something deeper, something waiting just below the surface. Ivanka leans forward, her smile tightening. "Well, Jasmine," she says smoothly, "it's easy to criticize from the sidelines. Leadership requires balance." The word balance lands like a warning, a polite way to remind everyone who's supposed to hold the power. Jasmine's expression doesn't change. "Balance," she repeats quietly. "That's an interesting word for someone who's never had to worry about falling." The studio goes still. The audience doesn't clap. The host glances toward the control room. Producers whisper behind the glass. One camera zooms in, unprompted, tighter on Jasmine, then on Ivanka. You can see the flicker of irritation in Ivanka's eyes. The next question comes, a setup about women helping women. But Jasmine doesn't bite. She looks directly at Ivanka and asks her own question instead. "How do you help women," she says, "when some of them are still sewing your name onto clothes they can't afford to buy?" The silence is deafening. The host tries to speak. Ivanka opens her mouth and interrupts. A quick jab masked as civility. That's when Jasmine decided to stop, playing polite, and drop the truth. Bomb that shattered the room. The air in the studio thickened. That heavy quiet that settles when everyone senses something real is about to happen. The audience wasn't moving. Even the camera operators hesitated. Jasmine sat still, hands folded, eyes steady. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost gentle. There was no anger in it. Just truth. Clean, sharp, deliberate. "You talk about empowering women," she said, turning slightly toward Ivanka. "But do you know what empowerment looks like when the paycheck doesn't arrive? When the factory floor floods and workers are told to keep sewing your name onto fabric that will be sold for more than they make in a month?" A murmur rippled through the audience. The host blinked, lost the next line on his cue card. Ivanka smiled, but it trembled. I'm not aware of that specific," she began. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She waited. The silence worked like a mirror, forcing Ivanka's reflection to fill the space. Then Jasmine leaned in, voice still calm. "I am. Because one of those workers was my friend." Gasps. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. The audience turned from Ivanka to Jasmine. Suddenly, this wasn't theory or politics, it was personal. "She sent me messages," Jasmine continued. "She told me about 14-hour shifts, no breaks, broken fans in the heat. She said the managers kept her quiet with threats, and when she spoke up, they replaced her. She was sewing clothes stamped with your name, Ivanka. Empowerment wasn't what she felt. It was exhaustion." Ivanka's eyes flickered. First confusion, then recognition. Jasmine reached into her bag and placed a folded paper on the table. Not theatrically, not for shock, just quiet proof. "This," she said softly, "is her last message before she was let go." The host whispered something to the producer. The producer shook his head. The show was still live. Ivanka opened her mouth again, the usual soft diplomacy faltering. "I think it's unfair to bring," Jasmine cut in, still calm. Unfair is her losing her job for telling the truth. No one clapped. No one breathed. The lights hummed above them like nervous witnesses, and then Jasmine did something unexpected. She smiled. Not smugly. Not in triumph. It was the kind of smile that carried sadness and pride in equal measure. You know, she said, people like her never make it to these tables. They build the tables. They iron the clothes we wear to them. And yet they're the first ones blamed when something cracks. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Another nodded slowly, tears forming. Phones lifted. The audience had already started recording. Jasmine didn't notice. She wasn't performing. She was remembering. You once said, she continued, that you wanted every woman to believe she could create her own destiny. But that only works when destiny isn't decided by someone else's logo. The host looked at the control booth again, chaos behind glass. Hashtags began flashing across the screen as social media caught fire mid-broadcast. Jasmine speaks. Ivanka silent. Truth on live TV. The room was a storm disguised as stillness. The viewers at home could feel it. The electricity of a moment where image collided with authenticity, and authenticity refused to flinch. Ivanka exhaled slowly, the perfect posture finally slipping. That's an unfortunate situation, she said, her voice thinner now. But it's not representative of the brand's values. Jasmine tilted her head. Then maybe your values need new representatives. A collective gasp. The line landed like thunder. It wasn't cruel. It was clarity. And clarity always hits harder than accusation. The camera cut to Ivanka, blinking, lips parted, eyes unfocused. The illusion cracked, not in one dramatic collapse, but in tiny fractures across her composure. For years she had built her fortress of grace. Tonight, one woman's truth made it transparent. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Truth had its own volume. The host tried to steer the show back to safety. Well, that's certainly he began. But the audience was already reacting. Some clapped hesitantly, others stood. Phones vibrated across the room. Twitter feeds filled faster than the cameras could pan. America wasn't just watching a talk show anymore. They were watching a mask fall in real time. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, exhaled softly. You can only hide behind branding for so long, she said. Eventually, the truth gets airtime, and for a moment, no one dared to move. Even Ivanka, usually a master of optics, sat frozen, her silence saying what words couldn't. The host finally cut to commercial, voice shaky. We'll be right back. But what happened after the cameras cut made the broadcast look tame. When the cameras cut, the world turned on. Within minutes, Twitter became a wildfire. Clips of Jasmine's calm takedown spread faster than the network could upload their official replay. Hashtags flooded timelines. Jasmine was right. Ivanka speechless. Truth on live TV, people who'd never watched the show were now sharing the clip. Pausing, replaying, dissecting Jasmine's every word. Memes, think pieces, and reaction videos erupted across platforms. Some called it the most honest moment ever aired. Others labeled it a setup. But one thing was undeniable. Everyone was talking about it. Supporters flooded Jasmine's social pages. You spoke for us. Finally, someone said it. That's what courage looks like. Ordinary people who'd felt ignored found a voice through her. Artists began sketching digital portraits of the moment. Jasmine calm, Ivanka stunned, shared with captions like, "Truth doesn't need volume, only conviction." Meanwhile, the other side scrambled. A statement from Ivanka's PR team appeared within hours. Ms. Trump remains committed to empowering women globally and regrets that mission was shared on air. But the tone-deaf phrasing only made things worse. Screenshots of the statement were reposted with laughing emojis and rolling eyes. Late-night comedians replayed the exchange on loop. That's not an interview, one joked. That's a documentary about corporate karma. News anchors on rival networks debated it like a cultural shift. Did Jasmine just expose the illusion of polished empathy? By dawn, the video had passed 10 million views, and Jasmine, the once unknown advocate, had become a symbol of integrity in an age of performance. Commentators called it the night authenticity won. But through the noise and the headlines, Jasmine stayed silent. No tweets, no interviews. Just one quiet post, hours later. Truth doesn't end when the lights go off. It begins there. The message went viral. Again, screenshots spread with captions like, "She's still teaching them how it's done." And yet, no one knew what she was about to do next. Because Jasmine's biggest statement wasn't on TV. It was what she said the next morning. By morning, the chaos had settled into clarity. The internet had crowned its hero, but Jasmine refused the throne. Her first full statement wasn't a victory lap. It was a mirror held up to a country too used to noise. The post read simply, "This wasn't about me." It was about what silence protects. No hashtags, no grandstanding. Just that, and it stopped people cold. In a digital world addicted to shouting, Jasmine had chosen stillness, and somehow that silence roared. Meanwhile, Ivanka began her damage control tour. Polished interviews, careful smiles, talking points rehearsed to perfection. "We may not always agree," she said on morning TV, "but I believe in dialogue." Yet every clip drew side-by-side comparisons to Jasmine's quiet authenticity. The contrast was stark. One woman performing grace, the other embodying it. Commentators called it a lesson in moral gravity. Others said Jasmine had cracked something deeper, not just a brand, but a pattern. For years, power had depended on politeness, on the idea that truth must always kneel to decorum. Jasmine had flipped that script without raising her voice. Across timelines, classrooms, and dinner tables, her words echoed. "It wasn't about me. It was about what silence protects." Teachers quoted it. Activists printed it on banners. It became less of a statement, more of a reminder, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to look away. Even critics began to admit it. Something had shifted. The glossy veneer of civility no longer felt safe to hide behind. The night had reminded America that truth, even whispered, is louder than privilege shouted. As the headlines faded and new scandals took their place, that one line remained, passed from post to post, whispered like a mantra, and for millions watching, the silence that followed spoke volumes. The studio lights dimmed. The chaos had ended hours ago, but the echo of that moment still pulsed through the air, a reminder that what erupted on live TV wasn't scandal. It was authenticity. The clip would replay 1,000 times across screens, stitched into reactions, debated on podcasts, dissected by pundits, but the truth was simpler. The real eruption wasn't in Jasmine's words. It was in what those words unlocked: dignity over deception, truth over branding, humanity over performance. As the camera cut to its final frame, Jasmine didn't linger. No grand gesture, no victory pose. She gathered her notes, gave a polite nod to the stunned panel, and walked out of the studio, calm, composed, unstoppable. The same calm that shook an empire built on image. Soft music swells. The voiceover begins. In a world trained to smile through lies, one woman chose honesty. And the world noticed. Clips flash. Ivanka's frozen smile, the crowd's gasp, the viral hashtag, Jasmine's quiet post the next morning. Each image folds into the next like memories blending into meaning. Because courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just refuses to stay silent. The music deepens. Text fades onto the screen, bold and luminous against a dark background. Live TV erupts. But what really erupted was truth. Then the invitation. If you believe in courage over comfort, hit subscribe. Join the movement that celebrates truth, not titles. A final pause. Not for drama, but for reflection. The sound of the crowd fades into silence, and then the last line appears, white against black, quiet, powerful, inevitable. The future belongs to those who speak, even when the cameras are still rolling.